Good afternoon. My name is Taylor Laredo, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the rest of the committee for this opportunity to speak before you today. I work as the Community Navigator in the Houston office of Texas Housers, a nonprofit organization that for over 40 years has worked to ensure that low-income Texans can achieve the American dream of decent, affordable housing in a quality neighborhood of their choice. I work with low-income renters, hard-working families who take good care of their kids in the face of rising housing costs and a housing supply with fewer choices. My colleagues who work with low-income homeowners see similar problems. There are over 4 million rental households in Texas, and over 1/4 of those households are severely cost-burdened, paying more than half of their income on rent. For these families, they can't even dream of home ownership. For our homeowners, there are 1.6 million cost-burdened or severely cost-burdened homeowners in the state of Texas, which, as you heard, goes to the lowest income households the most. As you heard from the Texas Comptroller's Office, their report, the Housing Affordability Challenge, rightly notes that the shrinking supply of low-rent units is amongst the greatest housing challenges to Texans. The comptroller found that Texans with extremely low incomes are the only income group facing an absolute housing shortage. And while no state in the U.S. has enough rental units for families with extremely low incomes, Texas ranks number 46th in the nation, with only 25 affordable and available rental units per every 100 extremely low-income households. Nearly half of instances in which renters in Texas felt pressured to move was due to a rent increase or a missed rent payment. Over the past few years, concerns have surfaced over the role of large-scale corporate investors buying up single-family rental housing in working-class subdivisions. And as you've all heard from all of the other folks who have spoken today, we don't have enough data to assess this problem. We need more up-to-date and clearer data to truly understand the activity of institutional investors at a large scale in this state. We suggest collecting data on institutional investors in Texas housing markets in the form of local rental registries or similar measures that collect appropriate and usable data on property ownership beyond just the name of the owning LLC. As mentioned, industry consolidation amongst large institutional investors through mergers and acquisitions is occurring, and we must keep an eye on this because if a single large corporate entity owns large parts of a neighborhood or subdivision and fails financially, it could lead to distressed housing conditions and more tenants at risk of suffering displacement. We saw this with the single-family homes after the mortgage crisis of 2008. Large institutional investors in the single-family rental market can make lucrative cash offers through favorable short-term lines of credit, which potentially can block Texas families trying to buy a home. Additionally, it's been observed that institutional investors tend to sell in bulk, and these homes may never return to owner-occupant status, also presenting challenges to the stock of available homes for potential home buyers. These owners also pose risks for renters as well. Emerging reports from other states found that large-scale corporations act more adversely to tenants' interests than smaller mom-and-pop landlords through practices such as using eviction court as a rent collection mechanism. These practices burden our justice of the peace courts, and not to mention devastate Texas families who go through an eviction proceeding. In addition to collecting and monitoring data, we suggest that the legislature comprehensively review the fairness of Texas landlord-tenant law. We believe that it's time to bring relevant stakeholders to the table to discuss fair and common sense protections for tenants that level the playing field. And there are solutions. More than a decade ago, this legislature created an affordable housing program that provides interest-free loans to low-income Texans who contribute sweat equity to build their own home. Despite that it is underfunded, the Texas Bootstrap Housing Program has supported thousands of Texas families to become homeowners. Additional state-level funding for dynamic housing programs for the lowest income Texans will help alleviate the affordability crisis. In summary, we recommend collect meaningful data on large corporate purchasers of single-family homes to learn more. Review and balance Texas landlord-tenant laws, and invest state resources to create housing that targets the families in most need through successful solutions that may be similar to the Texas Bootstrap Housing Program. Thank you for your invitation to testify today, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Appreciate your testimony. Members, any questions?
Yes, I have some questions
Representative
for you,
Cole.
Mr. Laredo. I certainly appreciate the work that you've been doing. Okay, you mentioned that institutional investor landlords have utilized eviction court as a rent collection mechanism. I want to know if you can describe any specific instances in which you have observed this or similar actions in private.
Well, yes. I have observed and documented almost 100 eviction dockets in Harris County as a part of my job, collecting observation data on each case. And I've seen trends in corporate landlords' filing patterns. They tend to file a large amount of cases, whether it be 10, 25, or 50 at a time, maybe even 100 on a single docket. And this practice of mass filing harms tenants, as eviction filing continues to appear on tenants' records, which can present a barrier to accessing further housing in the future. And then, although some of these cases may be dismissed after the filing, that still prevents harm, and it does show that these large corporate entities may not be directly working with the tenants and their properties to collect this rent. Like, a smaller mom and pop landlord who owns fewer units, they're more willing to work with them. And large corporate landlords also tend to use eviction agents in their place in eviction court. And these agents stand there and they read off the eviction petition, and if the tenant shows up to court, which as we know, oftentimes they do not, that tenant can say nothing to them. They can't negotiate, they can't get a reset on their case, they can't pay their delinquent rent. It's like talking to a wall.
Thank you.
Representative Gonzalez.
Yes, you mentioned that tenants who are extremely low income are facing an absolute housing shortage. Can you elaborate why those renters are facing that shortage and what are the potential impacts?
Of course. Extremely low income renters, or renters who make less than 30% of the area median income, are facing an absolute shortage of affordable housing, as there are not enough units in our housing stock that are intentionally priced at a rent that is affordable to them. And as fair markets rents increase in metropolitan areas in Texas, and as I noted in my testimony, more renters are cost burdened, and renters at other income levels are always able to rent existing lower cost units in the housing stock. But units priced at other levels are simply inaccessible to our lowest income renters due to income restrictions. The potential impacts of renters who are priced out include more families doubling up, more renters being extremely cost burdened, which forces them to make difficult decisions such as putting food on the table or paying for rent, or being one housing emergency away from housing instability. And in the worst case scenarios, thrusting them into homelessness, which requires services that are of additional cost to localities.
Thank you.
Members, any questions? Thank you very much.